If you are interested in starting your own podcast, we use Buzzsprout because it is simple and easy to use. Buzzsprout can get your show listed on every major platform while giving you the resources for a great podcast website, audio players that can drop into other websites, detailed analytics to see how people are listening to your podcast, and tools to promote your episodes. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and that is why over 100,000 podcasters are already subscribed to Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. Following the link in our episode descriptions lets Buzzsprout know that we sent you. So in return, you will receive a $20 Amazon gift card from Buzzsprout while signing up for a paid plan. Most importantly, every subscription through our link is always appreciated and helps support our show so we can continue delivering the quality content that you guys listen to. That being said, back to the show.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Junkies. I'm Andrew.
This is Joe.
And we're back to our basics. Another book review, recaps, all that. If you've been with us for the long haul, you know what it is. If you're new here, we are going to go through the book. There are spoilers, obviously. That'll be listed in the podcast description as well in case you can't read. But regardless, 0 Hour Time Crisis. It's our book this time. Big DC event back in, the 90s. Written by Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway. We've got Frank Fosco and Ken Branch also on the creative team. So, very of the time. How many issues was this exactly? I think it was like 5 plus some like tie-ins. I mean, our digital reader was not clear at all. They put all the covers at the back, so I didn't know what the hell was going on this entire time. But it certainly felt like more than like 5 issues.
It was definitely 5 issues, but you're right. It didn't feel like 5 issues. Some issues had like a part 1 and 2, which made me think it was 2 issues. And at the very end, it goes 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So I really don't know, but we might be starting off with issue 0. But like you said, 1994.
We start at 4.
We start at issue 4?
Yeah, they worked it backwards. It was like a special thingy. They went 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 as a countdown to the 0 hour.
Gotcha.
But okay. I mean, they didn't really tell us that in the reader, so it was just kind of like whatever's going on's going on, man.
Well, I just learned something. But you're right. 1994, Dan Jurgens, same guy that did Death of Superman. If you've been with us from the jump. That being said, I guess I'll start with issue 4. 2 dudes, Hunter and Wave Rider, are talking, and we find out one of them doesn't really trust the other, and we find out these guys are called linear men because they study and maintain time. But the reason they don't trust each other is, I guess, Wave Rider wiped out a whole reality to defeat some kind of dictator, and I guess Hunter doesn't really trust him. As they're kind of talking about the morality of that, they both find that they're being watched, and there's some kind of irregularity in the time strain rippling through realities now. So the two believe this could be caused by a character named Monarch, and both of these linear men decide that they have to go back through time to find him so that they can make sure that there's no more disrupting of the time stream.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, we weren't reading at the time. I mean, this was 94. I wasn't born yet. So I don't have the context of what the hell was going on necessarily. I mean, to a degree, I have a context, but like the issue to issue breakdown of what was going on and why this got set up the way it was, I mean, really, it's just DC trying to find another way to retcon all the mistakes they made within the past 10 years. But Hunter, as you brought up, he sucks. He's literally just Cable, but with no guns and a bad attitude. Wouldn't want him on my car ride because he's just a negative Nancy. Tell that dude to shut up. I don't know how Wave Rider didn't slap his ass. Well, not his ass, but, his bitch ass. But they suck. And the moral of the story is the Monarch is basically revealed to us as a Hank Hall, who, for those unfamiliar, is the Hawk of Hawk and Dove. He killed and assumed the role of Monarch after witnessing his future self kill Dove or something like that. So it gets real convoluted real quick, and also who cares because Hawk and Dove. But that sets up the stakes because Hawk's a dick and he turns into the Monarch, and the Monarch kind of sucks, but we're forced to feel like he's a badass because he kicked shitty Cable's ass, and Wave Rider, who's just like flamboyant Firestorm. But I'm sorry, bro. I mean, I'm just setting up the story here because reading this first issue, there's nothing that really grips you. I'll be real with you. So I'm trying to spice it up as best I can. But the Monarch builds,
you're setting the expectations correctly right from the gate. I would say that's a pretty good recap without having to read the actual issue.
Damn straight, bro. So these two, they are like, you know what, we're gonna try and we're gonna fix the timeline again because we all know that the first time didn't really work out so well. So Wave Rider and Hunter arrive in the past. Turns out they can move through like shortened timed, but they get ambushed and basically shot in the face by the Monarch, who tells them to basically shut up and he's gonna do what he wants. And honestly, that's like the whole like first issue or first part of the first issue that we get.
Yeah, and then in part two, Monarch is taking the linear men to random places in time and trying to mess up as much as possible in order to get them to give him help. Wave Riders temporarily is able to escape and attacks Monarch, but I guess that's what Monarch wanted. Monarch absorbs his powers, and we find out that Monarch, like you said, at the end of this issue, is some kind of like merger of Hawk and Dove, which is why he's smart and strong. But now I guess he becomes an even bigger villain at the end of the issue. He goes by Extent. And then to conclude the issue, Wave Rider is kind of now responsible for the evolution that's now Extent, and it starts a new crisis.
Yeah, and they literally say the thing too. They say it's a time crisis. And I was like, "Oh, they said the thing." Because this whole thing, I mean, I like to reckon that I'm a average to slightly above average smart guy. Not even that smart. I'm kind of dumb, but I like to think I have a grasp on what's happening when I read something. But there's so much time shenanigans that, I'm just of the thought that time's a flat circle. I don't know what's going on. I don't really care anymore. But if you don't understand time travel or don't care to, this book's going to be a headache for you, because all Wave Rider does is talk about seconds and in between seconds and the nanosecond after a second. I'm just like, bro, stop. Apparently, only a handful of characters in the DC universe can actually move through time with any sense of like purpose, and Wave Rider is one of them, and to a lesser extent Hunter, and the Linear Men, who no one really ever cares about or have heard of prior to this. But basically anybody who can and will travel through time was heavily featured in this, so that is kind of cool. Also, yeah, Hank Hall. Let's go back to that too. I'm a little all over the place. My dog's a little annoying, so he's got me a little scatterbrained while we're talking here. But the Monarch is Hank Hall, as we mentioned. But after Dove died, he absorbed some of her power. So I'm believing this is like the Dawn Granger one also died. Don't check me on that, because like even Hunter's like, this guy's an idiot. How did he make like a disruptor? So it turns out that he absorbed intelligence and powers from Dove, and it turns out that they also derive their powers from the Lords of Order, similar to Dr. Fate. So like these low level Teen Titans adjacent hippie and aggro guy who don't really do a whole lot apparently have really sweet mystical powers that they've been wasting this whole time, but now he's extant. And apparently he's just like buff as hell now and like can actually kick people's asses without needing weak ass Dove telling him not to. But I mean, yeah, that's our big bad. But moving out of that, into the next issue, we're kind of sitting at the end of time, because like I said, this book likes to jump all around, not just time, but to different groups and places. And the Time Trapper is like dying and the countdown to 0 hour begins. Time Trapper is, like what is it? I mean, technically he's like a future version of like one of the Legion of superhero characters, like Rocker or something like that. Regardless, he's at the end. He's, supposed to be like kind of untouchable to a degree, or, very strong for that matter. But, we see him getting tossed up, and then we see Metron and Darkseid on Apocalypse. Metron visits him and he's warning him of time unraveling. And Darkseid doesn't buy it. He's like, nah, dude, if that was happening, pretty sure I would have noticed. He's like, get the hell out of here. And Metron's like, well, screw you then. I'm giving him. And he goes to find his own allies. Who else? I mean, Batman, Superman, and we're in Gotham. So he's looking to recruit people.
Which, by the way,
yeah,
he does recruit Batman and Superman like a few pages later. But honestly, I mean, not to spoil anything this early on into the podcast, but Batman and Superman really don't do anything this whole entire series.
No, all they did was be the like moral guiding force of the gang, and then also like self-reference how they got fucked up in the past year, getting their backs broken and dying and returning from the dead. So I mean, that's really all they were good for. They just gotta get who they can, dude. I mean, that's who solved the last crisis they were dealing with. They're just like, well, who better? But while we're in Gotham, just prior to, Batman getting recruited, a young, healthy Batgirl is hunting down a very on-brand Joker, by the way, which I thought was cool. The writing in this like little Gotham snippet was fantastic. Batman and Robin kind of show up and they're like, the hell? Why are you walking around? Didn't you just get shot in the spine like last year? And she's like, no. So that's when Batman's like, oh, time and space is all messed up, huh? It only took him a few minutes to realize that. I mean, world's greatest detective, but he's like, no, that ain't right. And yeah, so then kind of back with the Wave Rider and Hunter. And for the most part, Wave Rider is kind of our narrator or, one of our main focal points for this. So we'll be jumping back to him quite a bit. And that's where we learn about kind of what's happening to the universe. Because as you mentioned, like Batman and Superman don't really help with shit. So Wave Rider is like, look, time and space are erasing itself from the future on back to the present. So, at the end of time on back to now. And they're going through different, centuries in the future, just kind of, checking in for lack of a better term. And they see Flash, Wally West in like, what is it, the 25th or 30th century or something like that. He's way up there just doing his thing because he's fast as hell. He could travel through time pretty easy, fighting Abracadabra or whatever. He subdues him. And then time starts to unravel, entropy at the end of time is starting to, hurl towards them and is going to basically wipe everything away. Kadabra says, the Flash can actually handle this. You just create a vortex, you double back through it at ultimate speed, and it'll be fine. It'll like collapse in on itself. And the Flash, he does this because he's the fastest there is, and he runs through it, but just like similar to the original Crisis, he starts to unravel and is ultimately torn apart, and that future just dies. So we're only like basically a couple issues in, and we've already seen one major hero taken off the table.
It was kind of casual.
Very casual.
It was nuts, but like honestly, like he's introduced and then like 2 or 3 pages later, he's already dead.
Yeah, and ultimately, like later on in the story, not to get too ahead of ourselves, only one person, well, 2 people really ask or care about what happened, which is kind of crazy considering he was like in the Justice League and everything. But as I mentioned, at this point, this is finally when Metron does appear, since now, much like the book, I'm jumping all over the place in the narrative. The heroes are finally recruited, post the Flash's death, because obviously nothing has stopped at this point, and Metron's, dilly-dallying on his dumb chair, trying to, get some homies to hang out with. And while he's talking to Superman and Batman about this, because obviously Batman's caught wind of it, time is all janked up everywhere else. Multiple different heroes, old heroes are showing up in times that they shouldn't. The Alpha Centurion from like his own time, I don't know, he got displaced. The Batgirl we already referenced, and a ton of others. And yeah, I mean, where we are at though is the Wave Rider he learns about the Crisis because this has basically been forgotten to time, and he shares it with Jay Garrick because the JSA is like assembled because they're like dealing with Vandal Savage and whatnot. And that's where we basically learn that, Jay Garrick starts to remember, what happened to Barry and everything like that, and then also that it happened to Wally. But they also learn that time is not just unraveling from the future on back, but it's also unraveling from the past up until the present. So not only are the future heroes and their timelines disappearing, but now people from the past, even such as Vandal Savage, are starting to disappear as, time unravels. So it's all coming to well, you guessed it, brother, a 0 hour in the middle, dude. Now the JSA is aware of that. They're the old heads, and they're like, well, we're just going to go investigate the cause of all this. And they're just going to let the young heroes kind of do their thing because everyone's supposed to meet up in New York. But obviously, this is kind of a race against time, for lack of a better phrase. So they're like, we may as well just split up. We'll figure out what the hell's going on. And, we trust the youngins to go do their own thing. And that's kind of where we leave off on this issue. But issue 4 was, or it's not issue 4. I don't know what number the issue was, but it's pretty sick.
So this is going to be issue 2.
Issue 2? Is that the one that starts off with Bart racing dinosaurs and whooping ass?
Yeah, I think so. And
that
like,
rules.
Everyone's starting to gather in New York.
Yeah, because that was awesome.
Yeah,
just the opening scene with Impulse, Bart Allen, because dinosaurs showed up because time's all displaced. Him racing them and Superman being like, hey, you want to, help us out, or, oh, can I help save you or whatever? And Bart's like, no, dude, I don't need your help. I'm just looking for his uncle or whatever, Uncle Wally. He's like, come on, dude, I'm just looking for Wally. And It was pretty sick though that he just clapped up some dinosaurs like that, because you know me, I'm a sucker for a dinosaur. But then Bart's from the 30th century too, so he's also time displaced. So what's going to happen to Bart? But here's one of the things. I mean, this isn't like a linear story that I'm telling, but why the hell is Power Girl pregnant? Because they showed that right after Bart, and
Yeah,
I was
it
just like,
was
what is
really,
happening?
yeah, and they really focus on it at the very end of the story, but like it seems like it's brought up here, but not very important
It's not
and
at in this story.
arbitrary. And I was kind of hoping that with this kind of introduction to Impulse, that he would have been a bigger part of the story. But I really don't think that they took advantage of this character enough.
No, I agree with you, especially when they set up the stakes for, what happens with Wally right beforehand. And it's more so just so they can mention that he's from the future and that eventually he's going to freaking phase out or something and fizzle out because time's unraveling and we haven't figured it out yet. But I mean, that's more or less what it is, just like Power Girl pushing out a baby at the end of the world for no reason. But regardless, all the heroes are gathered, and as we mentioned, the JSA is investigating the cause, and they're fighting the extant, or however you want to say that, bro. I don't know. It's a terrible name. But either way, he's whooping their old asses. They don't stand a chance. He's got chronal energy and all this other stuff. He's turning all the geezers into older geezers. He's giving them heart attacks on the spot. The only young guy, which for some reason Alan Scott's young still, he just zaps the power out of his ring and then he gets scared and hides like a bitch. So, I mean, the JSA got tossed up like it was nothing. We see the Hawk people and Wave Rider going around. That also borderline confused me. I mean, it's not confusing, but it was just like, why'd you add it when they were watching? Like, you know what? Now that I'm sitting to
Yeah,
think
because
about it, why did they make a point out of the Hawk people thing anyways?
well, when the JSA were supposed to investigate what's causing all of this instead of meeting up in New York with Superman and Batman, Hawkman and Wave Rider were supposed to be with the JSA, but for some reason they got separated because Hawkman has so many different variations throughout time and he's like unique to the rest of the JSA members for some reason and is separated to kind of merge every version of himself to become like a new god. And I
Yeah,
think they were just reaching.
but he witnessed like a hawk monster that inspired their powers. He had to deal with that, like witness that, and then like Hawk Girl merged with him, and then all the other ones Hawk merged with him, and he was like something of a god, they said. But then what did he do the rest of the story? It's kind of
Nothing.
set up with no punchline again, which, I'm just getting off track again. But either way, we're starting to see
No, but
that.
I mean, like, as we reflect, like, there's a lot of things that are set up to, like, be kind of redeeming and go
I, it,
nowhere.
It was probably because they were all in tie-ins that we didn't read, but at the same time, like that is not any way to run your business, is to force or thinking you're forcing people into reading tie-ins that no one gives a shit about. So, I mean, that was a terrible way to put that in the main story, at least. Whatever. I mean, if that's like its own little side plot, I'm sure that's cool for one issue, but meh. But either way, everyone's, the JSA are getting tossed up. Everyone else is in New York. We see the new gods. They're starting to sense the danger. And all of them are like quivering in their boots, like, oh no, this is worse than Darkseid coming. And then they don't do anything for the rest of the book either. They just disappear and are, eating grapes and beaten off. Well, while Wave Rider, who's the only one who has any knowledge of anything in general, is explaining to them how time itself is being like corrupted, destroyed, and basically so it could be rebuilt in a way. Guy Gardner, who's Warrior at this time, he's the one who hatches a plan to make it so Hal never goes bad, which I thought was cool because, during this time, Hal wasn't such a cool guy. But, Guy Gardner's like, well, we can redeem him then. And I was just like, well, that's cool because Guy Gardner's such a douche, but, he still cares about the homies. But, that's like a little subplot that they kind of open up there, kind of what can happen with the rest of this story. But then, like I said, the JSA is getting tossed up this entire issue. So Adam and Dr. Fate just get roasted. Wildcat, Sandman, they all got instantly aged or vaporized in some type of way. Time and space are merging again, causing storms and cities to appear. Wow, sounds exactly like Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then at the end there, the Wave Rider stabilizes the JSA to a degree in order to pull them out of the weird pocket outside of time and space that Extant's kicking their ass in. But then ultimately the extant confronts Wave Rider, pulls off his mask, and whoa, it's Wave Rider's face. And I was just like, oh my God, no way. Not really. That was actually like way more excited than I was. But that was an interesting wrinkle because this whole time he's Hank Hall, but apparently he's also Wave Rider. And this is what I mean by it gets confusing with all the time travel. I don't what
There
timeline are
are
we in?
way more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And after finishing that issue, I was like, okay, what's going on again?
I know. I was just like, wait a minute. Because like at the beginning too, like our Wave Rider gets like killed or like dispatched, but then we're in another timeline that's the same timeline, but the Wave Rider is alive because Wave Rider and knockoff Cable decide to go back through time. But whatever, dude. You want to just get into the next issue and see if we can make sense of it there?
Apparently, at some point, Extant, maybe when he was just Monarch, duplicated Wave Rider's powers, which is
So
why
many names, bro.
he can look like him, but I don't know for sure. I'm just guessing. But yeah, I don't know, dude. Metron is able to open up some kind of boom tube so all of the heroes can combine their energy to expand it to like a decent size so that they can all go through the gate together. So that they can travel through like this vessel to find all the JSA old and wrinkly.
To a decent size. I love the way you put it. Fucking dickhead in a fucking lazy boy shows up and he starts bossing everyone around. He's like Superman, Captain Atom, fucking shoot your lasers at it. And everyone's just like, okay, guy. And
nobody asks any questions.
No questions.
Everybody's just way cool with listening to Wave Rider.
Even
though they don't know this dude. I don't know this dude.
No, never seen him before. Oh, Jesus. Anywho.
Damn, taking orders from this dude.
Yeah. Oh, God. It's literally Wave Rider and Metron. Like, oh boy, we're in good hands. But besides, like you said, they power a boom tube. The future city goes away, I guess. I don't know where. Like, it's somebody else's problem. But somewhere without Superman. Anyways, the JSA, they return to Earth, and this also made me laugh because time's clearly unraveling and everyone's shitting their pants. Like, we just saw a city just show up above New York, and they're like, we got to get these guys to the hospital. It's like, what makes you think that the hospital's gonna do anything? There's literally time's unraveling. But
yeah, I know. And they're like, let's get this guy to the doctor.
I know. And the doctors are like, we saved everybody but one guy. And it's just, oh, okay, why couldn't you save him? But anywho, whoever's not dead in the JSA quits. Everyone's like, we're either too old to help or honestly, they were too, kind of intimidated to help anymore. And much like Crisis, we get teams sent across different times, one to the past, one to the future. And the Team Titans, not the Teen Titans, the Team Titans. So obviously really notable characters that everyone cares about are possessed and start attacking our heroes, which if you showed me a lineup of most of the Team Titans in this book, couldn't tell you one name of any of them. But, they start fighting those guys and like, I thought these were heroes because, of course, heroes fighting heroes. But, the heroes fight the heroes. Obviously, they're going to get the upper hand at some point or another. Yeah, there's really not too much to elaborate on in this issue. I will say that the Extant does take Wave Rider's powers, even though apparently he already did, so I don't understand that again. Metron shoots his lazy boy into the Terran time, and Superman and Captain Atom team up to make it explode. So they were able to at least close one of the rifts, which was kind of hilarious. And like I said, the Time Trapper kind of helps get the heroes from the future back to the present. And the Extant wants to merge with his past self because things aren't really working out so hot. And that kind of leads us off onto that issue into the final issue, I believe.
Issue 0. So last issue starts off with us finding out that there's someone pulling the strings behind Extant, and that he was letting Extant believe that he was the big bad of the story this whole time. Also, almost every century is gone at this point, but not the one in which Power Girl's pregnant. and and she's on the verge of delivering. Good news, though, is that right before Jay Garrick's timeline disappears, he was able to get in touch with his old teammate, the Spectre, and the Spectre's finally ready to help, even though he's been out of it this whole entire time.
Being lazy, dude.
He doesn't have his own lazy boy.
No
Metron
one
should
does
have
now.
beamed it to him. But that being said, the story transitions into like one big bad final fight, and somehow Adam's able to bring back Wave Rider, and with the help of everybody else, they're able to hold their own right up until the actual main villain appears, and we find out, and this is probably the only cool part of the whole entire story, that it's old Hell Jordan as Parallax.
Hell yeah, which is sick. So it turns out he's been using Extant this whole time. Extant, is basically just a pawn. Hal Jordan is Parallax. He's also much stronger than basically anything. Apparently, he slipped into the time stream. He apparently absorbed Anti-Monitor's weird chronal power energy, and now he's basically a borderline god. And he's about to bring about a 0 hour. Will recreate the universe. Obviously, he can't do that because he's a madman now. Everyone who has moral authority says, no, you can't do that. Even though on paper, it honestly doesn't sound like the worst idea, even though he went about it terribly because he was going to remake and reborn or make everyone reborn that did die. But regardless, he's the bad guy. Heroes aren't so sure about it. Anybody from a weird timeline's kind of like, yeah, I kind of rah-rah. We kind of like you, Hal Jordan Parallax. But obviously the mainstream heroes are like, no, go screw yourself. You can't do that.
Yeah, Barbara Gordon's feeling him because she's like, well, I am paralyzed, so if you redo everything, I might be able to walk again.
She chucks a batarang at him when she's trying to stop him, though, because she does realize that, no, that's not right. And I don't know.
That's the craziest part of the whole story.
What are they made out of rubber now? Because it just dinks off his head. It didn't even cut him.
Oh, yeah, dude. Batarang to my forehead. I'm dead.
I'm dead, but it just doinked off his. He wasn't even wearing like a helmet or anything. But,
no, I know.
That made no sense to me. So apparently they use rubber ones now.
Should have got lodged in his head, but
exactly.
It's not enough. And so his best friend, Oliver Queen, Green Arrow, shoots him too, but in the lantern embedded in his chest and kills his best friend.
Yeah, right when they said they absorbed all his powers too, because the heroes are going to plan to rewrite time like simultaneously, like right as he does it, so they can, do their stuff. But, Green Arrow just kind of murks him anyways, even though he doesn't feel so good about it. But yeah, and honestly, that's like the whole main thing there. I mean, obviously, like a new Big Bang happens. Our heroes are outside of time as an anomaly, so they're surviving outside of time. Hal Jordan, we don't know what happened to him. We presume he died because he got blown up during time space being reborn. Kyle Rayner's nowhere to be found, so he's already gone too. But right at the exact moment, all of our heroes do slip back into the time stream at the exact moment that they're supposed to, with only slight differences in this new universe. Very slight, apparently, according to Wave Rider. And basically everything has basically been restored. The universe, time, everything is back as it mostly should be. And, everyone who died not related to time and entropy is dead, but anybody who got eaten up by the weird time tears and all that shit, they're back. They're fine. They're healthy and good. But, we didn't read any issues after this. This was the mid-90s. We're likely not going to. So we don't know exactly how everything was resolved. Bada bing, bada boom.
At the very end of the issue, Power Girl delivers her baby.
Oh, boy.
And it leaves you feeling sad for Green Arrow because he smashes and destroys his bow against some kind of statue in frustration of killing his best friend. That being said, let me know if you agree with me. I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10. I felt like Extant or whatever did not really have any motive, so it was hard to tell why he was being such a dickhead. The story was short, which was nice, but it wasn't necessarily easy to follow, and it got convoluted because of it. There wasn't really any emotional stake either up until the very end with Green Arrow and Green Lantern. It was kind of like it was just like, this is bad guy doing something bad. This is what we need to do to stop it. Big fight at the end. Everything's all good. So it was pretty cliche. I mean, not everything was bad. Some of the characters were all right. like that Joker bit, and
Hmm.
I did appreciate that it was a shorter story, but it definitely could have been a lot more interesting. It kind of seemed like a Grant Morrison story without Grant Morrison. Probably my least favorite Crisis, which makes sense as to why we kind of skipped over it, but at least the listeners can now listen to, I think, every Crisis event because I think that we've covered them all at this point. I do apologize we didn't review them in order or chronologically. I think that might have been a missed opportunity, but all in all, it wasn't really worth it. Lastly, I'll say the best part was Hal Jordan at the very end. I guess it was cool to see the story revolve around Green Lantern and Flash as opposed to Batman and Superman, but that's all I got.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm with you. I gave it a 6 out of 10. Didn't excite me, borderline boring, very minor cool parts. That's that. I'm not going to waste time on that. Either way, 6 out of 10. I mean, you could skip it, honestly. That being said, if you want to hear the other crises, you know where to check out our backlog. Go to Comic Book Junkies. We're a podcast. You can find us on YouTube as well. Hit us up on Instagram. We're at CBJ Pod there. Comic Book Junkies podcast. You could type us in on Google. You'll find us on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you can find anyone, honestly. And with that, this was our book review for this time, but we are going to go back to a topic for next time. What that is exactly, you'll find out when you hear it. So stay patient, gang. But with that, we appreciate you for always listening. You guys rule.
Thanks, guys.
Later.